The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Ocarina of Time. By Ganondorf 8. May 7, 2015. Chapter 67, Dark Trials.
I knew you wouldn't detect my presence, but then how could you in a place where darkness reigns?
Asked Sunset Demon. She was right about me not being able to sense her approach, and for that I've fallen to her attack, but it wasn't as bad as it sounded. What she used against me turned out to be pretty weak, so it looks like she is weakening even more. I could even hear her breathing heavily, but I thought her plan involved absorbing some darkness in order to repair the wound which I inflicted back in the spirit temple. Does she have a different tactic in mind? I decided to wait for her to finish her speech before I make any move.
I said that I would be waiting for you, but things will be different this time. It looks like you'll be keeping your life after all, much to my displeasure. My wound never healed because of how serious it was, yet at least I managed to get one last hit in before the end comes. You do realize that attack did nothing to me?
I asked.
Feigning ignorance in order to hear what I had to say? I think you do have a little bit of evil inside you, but then I had a feeling my effort was going to be wasted. After 3 encounters where my defeat was handed to me every single time, our 4th and final encounter isn't going to be much of anything. In case you haven't figured it out yet, my wound is fatal. I tried absorbing as much darkness as possible on a few occasions, yet my body just couldn't take any of it in, so now I'm barely holding on with what little I have left,
replied Sunset Demon.
This is the reason why I don't like using violence, yet you kept on insisting because you desired my life as you wished for me to go back to my old self. You can't blame anyone for what has happened save for yourself. Don't think for a second that I'm going to finish the job, for that would be acting in a cruel and merciless fashion which isn't me,
I said.
Yeah, I figured you wouldn't,
said Sunset Demon.
Then why go to all this trouble just to attack me with such a feeble attempt?
I asked.
Because I wanted you to witness me perishing,
replied Sunset Demon. It sounded like she was acting irrationally if she wanted me to bear witness to something like that, yet I could see it in her eyes that she was being very serious. I then noticed the blood that was dripping out of her wound, and she wasn't doing anything to try and contain the flow. It just kept gushing forth, which did make me feel nauseous, and it made me want to turn away as the sight was getting unbearable. A loud thumping sound came out of nowhere a few seconds later, and the she-demon had slumped to the ground where I walked over because my heart wanted me to show compassion. It felt strange wanting to sympathize with myself, yet I felt guilty for I was the one who did this to her.
Back in the spirit temple, I believed that I could shrug off this wound, but luck wasn't on my side. It feels weird seeing you comforting me like this, for my desire involved seeing you dead, and becoming the one true Sunset Shimmer, but maybe a small portion of your good nature has rubbed off on me just like how a small portion of my evil nature has rubbed off onto you.
I could then feel her growing weaker, so I knew she didn't have much time left.
I guess we both adapted to the nature of the other, I said. Evil will always be a part of you, no matter what, as everyone is capable of it, but you have proven that you can resist the various temptations which can come from it. I hate to say this, but you are the one and only Sunset Shimmer who deserves to exist. I'm just a remnant of your past, and that makes me nothing but a shadow. I wanted my own life where I could conquer Equestria, and I needed to kill you to get it, but my dream will never happen now,
said Sunset Demon.
Why are you telling me this now?
I asked.
Because I want you to know that you have killed someone who is essentially a dark extension of who you used to be, someone who wanted a chance to live again as a flesh and blood being,
replied Sunset Demon.
A final means of tormenting me?
I asked.
You could call it that, yes,
replied Sunset Demon. I should have just killed her and be done with it, but she is expecting me to do that. I may have gotten it wrong when I said to Spike that she wouldn't attack me in her current condition, yet she did so anyway, much to my humiliation, but I know I'm right about it this time, so I'm not going to give her the satisfaction of proving her point. Her ambition towards killing me often blinded her, and this stance left her vulnerable more often than she will ever admit, but maybe in the afterlife she will accept her destiny for what it is, and finally decide to move on.
I guess this is our final farewell, I said. Oh, I plan on coming back,
began Sunset Demon.
What did you say?
I asked.
You may have defeated me, but you can never truly destroy the dark side of your personality. I will return one day, but it won't be happening in Hyrule. Nor will it happen in the human world, given how Princess Twilight and those friends of yours defeated you when you were me. I will return Sunset Shimmer, mark my words, but it will happen in a world similar to, but different from this one. I'm not sure why, but a voice tells me that you shall go to a world which is doomed to destruction,
replied Sunset Demon. Does this mean that I will be experiencing another adventure in a video game? No, I can't believe anything like that would happen again, so she must be trying to trick me. Case in point would be the voice that was telling her about it, and I doubt such a claim is even true, so I call it a false one. Even though I have enjoyed my experiences in Hyrule, I want to go back home, and never have to deal with anything like this for the rest of my life. The she-demon could tell that her words have riled me up, and she started laughing, which made me feel annoyed.
There's that expression of yours again. I never get tired of it. Are you done?
I asked.
I just wanted to get under your skin one last time, for it was the only thing I ever did right,
replied Sunset Demon. That's when I placed her gently on the ground, even though I could have simply dropped her, but I chose to be better than that, and not allow my anger to get the better of me. The she-demon at this point started to crack in places, and I don't mean her sanity. No, her body was beginning to crack, which does reiterate that she was just a shadow. I've seen monsters burn to nothing, explode, drop down dead, and even more examples too numerous to mention, but this one in particular made me react in a way which I found difficult to grasp. Was this because she was the dark side of my personality having been given existence, and now I had to watch this other half of me die?
Ha! In the end, you got killed. Although your better half took the fall. A pity, as you should have given your life up because you do know Ganondorf will make sure that you experience what could be the most painful death in all of creation. I may not get to witness it with my own eyes, but it's sure to be a glorious thing indeed. I stepped back because I had no idea what would happen next, yet my answer came quickly as her body suddenly crumbled into dust before scattering about in the wind which came out of nowhere. The she-demon is gone, I said. Are you okay?
Asked Spike.
I'm not sure how I feel about this. On the one hand, her death means I don't have to deal with her anymore. And yet, a part of me feels like I died along with her because she was my dark side. Despite everything she has done to me, she and I are still the same person even though we're complete opposites.
I replied.
Could it be that you had some pity for her?
Asked Spike.
I guess so, because it was by my own hand that she even existed. The darkness inside of my heart was most likely repressed after I was defeated instead of being completely wiped out, and it did try to come back as I had some issues I needed to work out. Once my pony, ears and tail appeared during the final conflict against the Dazzlings, I believed the darkness within me was gone forever, yet I sensed it was still there, lurking about, waiting for the chance to get revenge against me. I never would have guessed it could manifest into what became Sunset Demon. I could have saved her from this terrible fate, but she refused to listen to me as her determination was too powerful to be stopped.
I replied.
Creatures of pure darkness cannot be saved,
said Spike.
But, Princess Twilight once told me that Fluttershy, from her world, was able to reform a spirit of chaos,
I said.
I'm guessing this spirit merely acted evil as a means of having fun, because chaos can be many different things. This spirit probably wasn't malicious, and instead wanted to cause mischief, so it could be reformed. Once you've reached a particular point when it comes to being corrupted with darkness, nothing can be done to bring you back,
said Spike.
So the she-demon was doomed from the start?
I asked.
It was by her own hand that she ended up getting killed, for you had no other choice but to fight back Sunset Shimmer. Many times did you attempt to resolve the differences between both of you through more peaceful means, yet she couldn't accept it. The she-demon was blinded by her own ambitions, and was oblivious to the fact that her own actions would have grave consequences. While you can mourn her passing, you need not blame yourself, as she represented the old you,
replied Spike. Once again, his words have reached out to me during a difficult time, and it makes me often wonder what I would be doing right now if not for his guidance. Sunset Demon couldn't be reasoned with, and is now dead because her obsession consumed her judgment. Those claims of hers which revolved around not being blind were false, for she was still determined to prove herself as the real me. I guess now she has plenty of time to think about what she will do next, but there was one thing left which made me very nervous.
Do you think she will return?
I asked.
I don't know, as I have no idea how things work in the world beyond this one,
replied Spike.
Those words she said make me think she could bring herself back from the grave, I said. You don't need to worry about it, as you've proven yourself to be better than her. If she does end up coming back, you will be able to defeat her with ease,
said Spike. This is true, as I've defeated her every time she appeared before me in order to challenge me. I didn't like the fact that my life and future were constantly on the line, but now I've shown that I am the one and only Sunset Shimmer. My life is my own to decide what happens with it, and nothing from the past can take that away from me. If she does return in the future through any kind of method, I'll be ready for her. I then felt as though a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but it wasn't the one which related to saving Hyrule. No, that one was still as heavy as it's always been, yet this weight was one related to inner turmoil. I had so much of it which formed into Sunset Demon, but she's gone now and I don't feel being bogged down any longer, so now I can finally focus on the matter at hand.
Okay, using a light arrow should destroy this barrier, right?
I asked.
That's what Rora said,
replied Spike. Firing the light arrow, it struck the barrier with a bright glow, and destroyed it completely, which was a sigh of relief.
Well, that's one barrier down and only 5 more to go. Hopefully, it won't take as long to go through the other passageways like it did with this one.
All of a sudden, an image of Applejack appeared which caught me by surprise, as I wasn't expecting anything like this, and it looked like she had something to say.
The shadow barrier has been dispelled, so now you are one step closer to accessing Ganon's tower. The way onward is going to be difficult, and so I would suggest that you use your increased strength to seek out the Great Fairy,"
said Applejack.
"I intend on doing just that, but which barrier do you suppose I should focus on next?"
I asked.
"With the golden gauntlets in your hands along with the rest of your weapons, you can tackle any of the remaining barriers in whatever order you wish. Once you have acquired what you can obtain from the Great Fairy, I would suggest focusing on the barrier which relates to you personally. I am certain you already understand my meaning, so I implore you to rescue Princess Zelda as soon as possible. If you are worried about getting back to the central chamber, allow me to return you there,"
replied Applejack. Her image then disappeared, and I suddenly found myself being warped in a rather unusual fashion, where I was back in the main area again, as though I never moved a single inch in the process.
"That certainly was something," I said.
"Look above you," announced Spike. I did as he asked and noticed a stream of purple energy which was connecting from the wall where the door was, and the tower. It then disappeared, which didn't make sense, but then my partner quickly clued me in.
"Every time you destroy one of those barriers, we will be sent back here where the energy stream will vanish. If you repeat this process with the remaining barriers, the field will disappear, and Ganon's tower will become accessible." "That's good to know, as I wasn't liking the idea of having to find my way back," I said. "You have the golden gauntlets, so we can continue with the next passageway, or check out the fountain,"
suggested Spike. Without even saying a word, I started to make my way back outside, for I wanted to see what Adajo was going to give to me. I then realized that this would be the last time I get to see her, so maybe she has some advice regarding Ganondorf's castle. Upon exiting into the gloomy atmosphere, I ran over the bridge and turned left, where I continued to run until I reached the monolith stone.
"Well, let's see what these gauntlets can do," I said.
Grabbing the bottom of the stone, I had my doubts that I was going to lift it and instead injuring my back, but I somehow lifted it up as though it weighed like a small pebble.
"Wow! This stone is so light in my hands. It's like I could juggle it for hours on end without getting tired in the process."
While I could gawk at what I was doing, I knew that I had to be serious about this, so I tossed the monolith stone behind me, where it crashed into the ground quite a distance away. That wasn't my intention, mind you, for it seems that I don't know my own strength. Upon entering the fountain, I walked over to the altar and played Twilight's Lullaby, and within a matter of moments, Adajo appeared before me. This would be the last time where she will be speaking with me on friendly terms, for when I go back to the human world, she will still have bitter jealousy and rage.
"Welcome, Sunset Shimmer. I am the Great Fairy of Courage,"
said Adajo.
"So the Triforce element you represent happens to be the last one I encounter?"
I asked.
"I am not sure why this had to happen, because what you will gain would have been immensely helpful a long time ago, but I suppose getting it now is better than never getting it. You are the first person to have visited this fountain ever since Ganondorf built his accursed fortress, for the monolith stone had been preventing anyone from coming here and seeking my aid. Granted, even if the stone was not there, no one would have come, as this place is devoid of all life itself. The evil king has transformed this once vibrant land into one of sheer desolation where nothing can sustain itself,"
replied Adajo.
"That's why I've awakened the 6 sages, because he must be defeated if peace is to return," I said. "You must also prevail against him to rescue the Hylian princess, and return where you truly belong. Yes, child, I am fully aware that this world is not meant to be, and that all of us belong in a different one filled with an alternate life. Do not lose sight of these objectives, otherwise they shall escape from your grasp, and you shall forever be stuck here,"
said Adagio. She certainly had a way with words when it came to reminding me of what was at stake, and that failure was not an option. I want to return home to my world, and nothing will stop me from achieving that goal. Actually, I want to return to Equestria in order to resolve some issues, but the chances of me going back there are slim to none, so I'll have to settle with the human world. It was a pretty tall order because of what was at stake, but I'm ready for this as I've overcome all manner of odds. Adagio then noticed the expression on my face, and began to comment about it as it amused her.
"You are determined to succeed in your task, and while this is truly an admirable effort, do not allow yourself to be consumed with wanting success. To prevail with honor is one thing, but to do so through deplorable means would be a travesty." "I know not to become corrupted," I said. "Ganondorf is known for his manipulations, so you must not be tempted by his words,"
said Adagio.
"He won't be using me anymore,"
I shouted.
"As long as you remain true to yourself, these words will come to pass,"
said Adagio. It was at that point when I remembered that I was going to ask her about the passageways inside the castle, for I'm sure she knows plenty about it. Or, she may know nothing because she has been thwarted several times when she tried peering into the veil of darkness.
"Do you anything about his castle?"
I asked.
I knew this question would be asked, for you wish to have insight on what lies ahead. While I cannot tell you the exact obstructions which you will encounter, I can inform you of basic information which should be enough. Shadow has already been conquered, so 5 more remain, with forest being one that involves fighting the wind, and needing to light the way forward. Fire is an inferno where silver is needed, and the strength of a giant will lead you to victory. Water shall bring back the cold, and spirit will test you with the sun's light combined with fire. Finally, light appears to be the least dominant, but do not be deceived by illusions,"
replied Adagio. Unlike Star Swirl, who enjoyed being cryptic, Adagio was straight to the point with what she had to provide. While I would have preferred more, the fact that she was able to give me any at all was satisfying enough.
"I'll be sure to remember this advice," I said. "I know that you wish to have known more, but Ganondorf's castle is surrounded by a strong darkness. It was a miracle that my power was able to peer through that shade, but I cannot do it again, for I do not possess enough strength. Sunset Shimmer, powerful monsters await you, and that is where my gift to you shall prove itself. You have acquired new magic spells, the ability to use the elements, and even possess an enhanced magic meter, yet your health remains the one inconsistent factor. No longer shall this latter be left out, for I will now enhance your defensive capabilities,"
said Adagio. She then cupped her hands around her mouth, and began to blow a powerful wind which enveloped me in a beautiful-looking mist. By the time it had disappeared, I still felt the same as before, yet I could sense I was different somehow.
"So what is this enhancement?"
I asked.
"Your defense has been increased as though you were wearing armor, even though you still appear the same. Damage that is inflicted upon you is reduced by half, no matter what kind of attack is used. Even Ganondorf's magic cannot break through this gift, so now you possess a better chance of defeating him. I have done all I can to help you, Sunset Shimmer, so now the rest falls onto your capable shoulders. Heed the words of the Sheikah woman, and tackle the passageway that connects with you based on where you are from. When battle has made you weary, please come back to see me,"
replied Adagio. With that, she returned to her fountain, leaving me feeling sad, as the next time I see her, it will be as an enemy, but at least she was able to give me useful information. As I left the fountain, I checked my body because I still don't feel all that different despite sensing something had changed.
Do you doubt the power of the Great Fairy?
Asked Spike.
No, as her previous gifts have proven to be very useful, yet I feel the same as before, I replied. Being given a defensive enhancement is no mean feat, Sunset Shimmer, for such a blessing requires a lot of magic. The Great Fairy has given you everything you need to accomplish your task, so you need to defeat Ganondorf once and for all. I know what I said sounds rather biased considering your weapons and magic have done more for you than the blessings, but this final gift will make things easier. Right now it doesn't feel like she did anything, but we'll find out when you are forced to defeat a monster to progress," said Spike. "And what did you think of those hints?"
I asked.
"While they could have been a lot better, we should appreciate the fact she provided us with information anyway,"
replied Spike.
Both Applejack and Adagio suggested that the next passage we check out should be the one based on where I'm from. Would that be this world, the world I call home, or the one which is my true home?
I asked.
"It's whatever you choose to associate it with," replied Spike.
The Kokiri Forest was my home in Hyrule because it's where I started all of this, and the human world represents where I currently live, yet I don't see any connection there. My true home, Equestria, is a magical kingdom where anything can happen, yet the forest does possess magic in the form of fairies, so that's a connection. The Kokiri Forest, and the magic of Equestria. It then hit me like a blinding flash.
"The Forest Temple," I announced. "You meant to say the forest barrier, right?"
asked Spike.
"That's what I mean," I replied.
If I recall correctly, the color that was associated with the forest was green, and the door with the green-colored circle above it was just to the right when entering the main chamber. I'm not sure why I need to go to this barrier next considering I can tackle these in any order, but I might as well go through with it. It didn't take long for me to get back to the magical bridge, and cross over it to enter the castle again, yet I chose to run through the hallway this time. The two BMOs were still there, but I ignored them as I didn't want to waste bombs, and I entered the main chamber before turning to the right. In front of me was the door with the green circle above it representing the forest, and in this next room I found myself staring at a number of torches which looked suspicious. There was another one on top of a ledge situated above a locked door, yet I could sense something odd in here.
"I guess lighting those torches will open the way," I suggested. "That would make for an easy puzzle," said Spike. "But why is it that I can sense a presence around here?" I asked. "Having doubts about what you can see and what chooses to remain elusive, I am not surprised, kid, for you have often questioned your senses, which has resulted in some poor decisions," replied Tyrek, whose voice once again boomed throughout the room. I forgot he was going to speak to me every time I entered a new passage, so now I have to deal with listening to his words. "You are most fortunate, kid, for the way to the barrier consists of simple challenges which should be easy enough for you. Then again, even the easiest of tasks can end up becoming a nightmare if you allow yourself to become too complacent. How do you plan on approaching what lies ahead?" "Nothing you send my way will overcome me," I replied. "Such a bold statement, yet you need to back up this claim with more than mere words," said Tyrek. "I'll be sure to do just that, and it will be something you'll get to see considering you're watching me from your safe haven," I said. "I find it amusing how you try to act tough, yet in truth I can see the fear, and it desires to flee. How much of this bravado is true with the rest being a means of desperation due to being overwhelmed by a darkness which can consume you at any moment? We shall soon discover the answer as you progress further through my castle,"
said Tyrek. His voice then disappeared, leaving me to contemplate what he said, and I was feeling pretty annoyed at how he claims that my actions are merely me trying to play the role of a hero. I know that I'm not the ideal hero because of doing things differently, yet I'd like to think I've done a pretty good job even with some slight issues at hand.
"That presence I sensed. I can't feel it anymore," I said. "Could it have been a mental illusion created because of where we are?"
asked Spike.
"Ganondorf is trying to psyche me out with mental games," I replied. "Don't let him freak you like that, Sunset Shimmer, for you need to remain calm and collected. Succumbing to the darkness would be the worst possible thing, and he wants to make sure that happens. He may not be admitting it right now, but deep down he's afraid of you because all of his efforts to kill you have failed, so now he is forced to take care of you himself. You need to take this to heart, and continue defying him at every turn so that he will really get worried,"
suggested Spike.
"So, turn his own tactics against him?" I asked. "The evil king enjoys dishing it out, but he probably can't take it,"
replied Spike. This gave me a renewed sense, so I need to destroy these remaining barriers so that I can enter his tower, which is sure to be guarded, as why he would leave it defenseless for someone to try and assault it. Turning my attention to the puzzle that was before me, I knew straight away that fire was needed to light these torches, and while my own magic would do the trick, I'm forced to rely on using Hylian magic.
"I could fire arrows and light up each torch one at a time," I suggested. "Doing that would consume magic power, and you need to use it carefully so as to keep those blue potions intact. You will need to shoot a fire arrow up at the torch well above the door at the end of the room, but perhaps using Din's fire to light the remaining torches will save you necessary magic," suggested Spike. It had been a short while since I last used it, but it's going to be getting some use. Taking out the gem which contains the spell and walking forward until I was standing in between the 4 torches, I performed the necessary poses before casting it. The resulting flame quickly spread its way across, lighting up the torches, and that left the remaining one, which was too far away for Din's fire to reach, which was a shame as I would have expected it to. Switching over to the fairy bow, it wasn't easy aiming for such a far-away target, and I needed to conserve my magic power, so I moved as close as possible. Whoever made the decision to place this torch up so high was sadistic, but I sighed and fired a single arrow, lighting the remaining torch on fire. A small treasure chest then materialized behind me before the door in front unlocked when the iron bars raised. Yet could this chest be one of those traps like I experienced in the Spirit Temple? "What do you suggest?" I asked.
"I would go for it, but take extreme caution because you never know,"
replied Spike.
"If it is one of those trap chests, my health is pretty good, so being frozen for a few seconds shouldn't be fatal," I said.
"No, not really," said Spike.
"Okay, I'm going to take a chance and see what it contains,"
I said. Putting the fairy bow away, I walked back to the chest and kicked it open and took out a mere 5 rupees, which wasn't a good prize, but it was better than being blasted by a cold spray.
Considering where we are right now, I don't think getting rupees at this point serves any purpose unless there just so happen to be a place nearby where I can purchase items.
"That would be a bizarre thing indeed," said Spike.
"How so?"
I asked.
"Anyone who managed to set up a shop inside of the castle must have been extremely lucky to have not been caught by now. If such a shop did exist, the only place that would be ideal is the central chamber, but I can't see that being possible. I suppose all we can do now is just keep going until we find that barrier."
replied Spike. When I entered the next room, a sudden gust of wind blew about from either side of me, which gave me a startle, and when I looked in both directions to see what was going on, the wind was coming from 2 fans, just like what I experienced in the Shadow Temple.
Why would something like this be here in a passageway dedicated to the Forest Temple?
I asked.
I know what you mean, Sunset Shimmer. This room is definitely one that relates to the Shadow Temple because of those fans blowing strong wind about, but maybe you can use it to your advantage. You do have the power to use wind magic, and this room has exactly what you need to create some interesting results,
replied Spike. There was a deep abyss with small pillars which served as platforms for me to step on. Scattered across the room were silver rupees, and already I didn't like where this was going, but I had no other choice but to do it. A lone BMOS was in the middle of the room, and I could just barely make out a switch that was located near the back.
I think the hover boots will prove useful,
I suggested.
Not to mention needing to use the iron boots,
added Spike.
Why would I use those?
I asked.
These winds will blow you across great distances, especially when combined with the hover boots, but remember we have an abyss right below us, and that means instant death were you to plunge down there, all because the wind managed to blow you off a ledge. By effectively using the iron boots, you can work with the wind rather than against it. Collecting all 5 silver rupees will unlock the door in front of you, so you need to approach this puzzle with care,
replied Spike.
I'm just annoyed that I have to collect those rupees again,
I moaned.
At least you get some money out it,
said Spike.
I guess so,
I sighed. Unless this supposed shop doesn't exist, collecting these rupees does me no good, for all it will do is give me some extra money. That's when I began to take note of how this room operates regarding the fans. One of the silver rupees was to my left, but the fan was going to blow me into the abyss should I get caught when it activates. Then I looked at the next pillar, which was further ahead, so perhaps I do want to get blown about, yet I just need correct timing, otherwise my death is certain. Switching to the hover boots and not falling down due to the lack of traction, I waited until the fan ceased with its actions before hovering to the platform and collecting the first silver rupee. I had no time to prepare as the wind resumed blowing, and combined with my boots, I hovered across and landed on the next one, where I got the second rupee.
That was pretty creative thinking,
commented Spike.
I can't celebrate just yet as I still have 3 more rupees to collect,
I said.
There's one above your head,
announced Spike.
Really?
I asked. I then looked up, and sure enough there it was, but when I tried to jump up and grab it, something was preventing me from doing so, which made no sense. After attempting to do this for about a minute, I gave up and started to complain about not being to do a simple task like jumping.
Okay, why can't I jump up and get it? I know that I'm pretty good at jumping as I've done it plenty of times back in the human world. You can't jump in Hyrule in that sense,
said Spike.
Why?
I asked.
It's one of those unknown factors which are in place to prevent someone from taking advantage of physics,
replied Spike. Was he being serious about this? I can't jump up and grab that rupee all because of some mechanic? Could it be one of the rules behind this video game which I should have paid more attention to? I really need to remind myself to ask Rainbow Dash how to play this game when I return home, for I can't believe I'm being denied in this fashion.
So what can I do now?
I asked.
You need to take care of that BMOS in the middle of the room, but don't worry about it firing a laser at you. Remember when I told you about its depth perception? It's on a lower level than us, so all it can see is whatever is on the same level. Meaning you can safely deal with it without fearing some kind of counterattack. There could be a rupee hiding inside, for we know that's a possibility,"
replied Spike. I removed the bomb bag from my belt before taking out a bomb, and tossed it into Bemo's, causing it to explode on impact. Sure enough, there was another silver rupee, but it was that switch below on the lower pillar which piqued my interest, so I proceeded to hover down and activated it, which at first did nothing.
"Well, that was pointless,"
I moaned, but when I turned around, I received quite a shock when I saw a raised column had appeared with a hookshot plate on top.
"Okay, that does explain how I can reach that silver rupee now. The rupee is in the path of the wind, so be careful not to get blown into the abyss,"
said Spike. Taking out the long shot and aiming carefully while waiting until it was safe, I fired the chain which attached to the plate, and I got pulled along, where I quickly grabbed the next silver rupee before hovering over to the fourth one. I then hovered onto a small ledge that was next to a platform, which is where the locked door was, yet the final rupee was on a really small pillar that was in front of one of the fans. I needed perfect timing to hover across, collect it, and make it back before I get caught in the wind. Maybe switching to the iron boots would be a wise idea, but only after I've gone over, as I doubt I can jump from platform to platform wearing heavy footwear. As soon as it stopped blowing, I hovered across to the pillar before switching to the iron boots, for the wind suddenly picked up again. It didn't feel comfortable having a powerful gust being blasted in my face like this, but I must remain strong. At that moment, I had forgotten to pick up the final silver rupee, so I did, and it unlocked the door ahead.
"And I didn't need to use any wind magic,"
I said.
"Were you intentionally holding back?"
asked Spike.
"Not really, as I just didn't have a reason for using it. Until now, that is, as I just got an interesting idea,"
I replied. Concentrating on the wind being blown at me, I was able to manipulate it to flow around to my left and blow me across the abyss until I reached the door before switching back to my regular boots. While it wasn't perhaps the best use of an elemental magic, I used it regardless because it had been neglected for so long, as wind was something I didn't encounter often. I opened the door and entered the next room, which contained the second barrier.
"Again, there is nothing protecting these things, so why would Ganondorf just leave them out like this without any form of defense? Do you really find it concerning?"
asked Spike.
"Not really,"
I replied.
"Then forget about worrying over protective measures,"
said Spike. Taking out the fairy bow and using the light arrow charm, I fired at the barrier, which caused to explode, and a few moments later, an image of Fluttershy appeared.
"The forest barrier has been dispelled, so you're now a third of the way there, Sunset Shimmer,"
said Fluttershy.
"I just realized that I should have made contact with you via your song in order to see if you could give me some advice,"
I said.
"If you had gone and done so, I wouldn't have been able to provide an answer. Ganondorf's castle is surrounded by a powerful veil of darkness which prevents most from being to peer into it, and the forest spirits wouldn't have succeeded. However, they did tell me that you gained some advice from the Great Fairy who lives outside in the desolated area,"
said Fluttershy.
"She wasn't able to get too much information because of the darkness blocking her vision, but what she said was enough to give me an idea of what I could be facing. It did weaken her greatly though, as she used more power than she wanted, so I don't expect her to give me any more help, and that's fine as she needs to rest,"
I said.
"I believe you are fearing something, aren't you?"
asked Fluttershy.
"The ice in the passageway which leads to the water barrier,"
I replied.
You need to conquer this fear, so I suggest tackling that one next despite your reluctance. Now, I shall send you back to the central area of the castle, so good luck in destroying the remaining barriers. Oh, I have one last piece of advice. Search for a wall in the central area that has a slightly different color than the rest of it whenever you have a moment. I don't know what it actually means, but it could be exactly what you require if you have a need for it,"
said Fluttershy. Her image disappeared, and I was warped back to the main area again through that crazy fashion like before when Applejack did the same thing. When I returned, the green energy vanished, indicating that the forest barrier had been taken care of, so now I needed to move on to the next passageway.
"We're going to focus on destroying the water barrier now,"
I announced.
"Taking Saria's words to heart?"
asked Spike.
"I can't allow my fear of being frozen on the spot to get the better of me, so I want to take care of it now, and not allow it to continue lingering above my head. If there was a saving grace in all of this, it would be not dealing with any water, seeing as the water temple wasn't exactly kind to me, if you know what I mean. Anyway, where is the door I need to enter?"
I asked.
"It's the next one to your right,"
replied Spike.
"Oh,"
I said sheepishly before looking downward and seeing the door in question. I walked down and opened it, where I entered a room which started out like a typical dungeon chamber, but then it changed to a frozen wasteland with icicles above me which look ready to fall at any moment, and a ring of icicles that surrounded an altar where I could see blue fire.
I never did enjoy exploring the ice cavern because of how cold it was, and seeing this is a reminder of what I had to endure as a means of acquiring the iron boots. Just looking at all of this ice is enough to send shivers down my spine. You have reached a place which chills you to the bone because of what you experienced in the past, and rather than choosing merely to run away, you have decided to continue forward,
said Tyrek.
At least I was anticipating you this time,
I said.
So far the trials of my castle have not been testing you all that much, but that could change at any moment. The ice that you see before you is very real, and is even colder than what exists in the frozen wasteland that was once the home of the Zoras, so unless you wish to be frozen to death, I would advise to be quick about it, but of course the frozen denizens shall provide the same reception. Can you recall any experiences in that frozen cave?
Asked Tyrek.
I'd rather soon forget about them,
I replied.
Then you shall fail in due time,
said Tyrek.
What does that mean?
I asked.
Perhaps this is where you shall finally meet your end, kid? Or, you may yet choose to embrace what you would call a cherished memory to help you. My power grows even more with every passing second, and I yearn to use the full extent of my strength against you, but then I may not even need to, because the trials of my castle shall be what kills you in the end,
replied Tyrek. His voice trailed off once again, but I knew at this point that he wants me to reach his location, but he hopes that his defenses will soften me up, especially since they have so far failed in their task to do so.
It looks like there aren't any monsters around, I said. Do you recall what we encountered in the ice cavern?
Asked Spike.
I remember the ice keys without a doubt, but there was that other one,
I replied.
You're thinking of a Freezard, and you should remember their ability to be invisible,
said Spike. That's right. Some of those frozen chunks of ice appear transparent, and can show up out of nowhere, so it looks like a few of them are somewhere in this room. I need to destroy them quickly before they begin to freeze me on the spot. I probably won't get killed because of my health enhancement, but it will become an inconvenience because of taking too much damage, which would prompt me to use one of my blue potions. I might even need to use one because of the blue fire being necessary to melt the red ice which I can see behind the altar.
I'm already starting to feel cold,
I said.
That's because of the icy conditions, and most likely in the rooms that follow, but remember that this isn't the ice cavern, so you don't need to worry about having to trudge through numerous rooms while battling against the deep chill. By the way, I should mention right now that warp songs don't work while you're exploring the castle, so don't even bother trying to play the Ocarina of Time unless it's for something extremely specific,"
said Spike.
"What?"
I exclaimed.
"The dark power which radiates here is so powerful that it prevents you from warping under any circumstances. If for some reason you desire to warp to another location, you won't be able to unless you exit the castle. I'm not sure if this will apply to Ganon's tower as I have no idea how that area works,"
said Spike. Even though I wasn't going to be warping as I want to end this, it was a slight inconvenience because it would mean backtracking all the way outside. The cold chill was now starting to affect me as I was shivering and trying my best to keep warm, so I needed to work fast if I want to reach my goal, and not freeze to death before getting there. Walking forward, I quickly found myself dodging the falling icicles which constantly fell from above. For every time one dropped down, it would get replaced with another seconds later. I suppose this would be a good time to use the Megaton Hammer, but I decided instead to rely on my fire magic as I can use it to warm myself up when it gets too cold. Once I had reached a safety area where the icicles couldn't hit me, I melted the icicles which were surrounding the altar, and the resulting water seeped into the ground where it froze instantly.
"I need to make a run for it, and grab some blue fire," I said. "Good thing you have an empty bottle," said Spike. "It was because I ran out of rupees which prevented me from filling up the remaining bottle with blue potion," I said. "Remember to watch for the Freezards as they are going to be lurking about. You can either use the Megaton Hammer and shatter them to pieces, or you can go with a more direct approach which involves using your magic," said Spike. "Do I even need to destroy them?" I asked. "There's a locked door behind the red ice which can barely been seen, so it's safe to assume that you need to," replied Spike. "I'm not sure why, but I have this feeling that I'll need a second bottle of blue fire. I don't want to drink my blue potions as I spent so many rupees on buying them, and using them when I have full health and slightly lower magic power would just be a waste. Maybe what I'll do is enter the next room, then come back into this one and refill my one empty bottle with blue fire again. My plan won't work though if that door ends up closing behind me with iron bars, and that would mean being stuck here until I freeze to death as my magic wouldn't last forever," I said. "No need to worry about it until the time comes," said Spike. I dashed to the altar where I took out my lone empty bottle, filling it up with blue fire, all while being pelted by icicles falling from above. My enhanced defense was kicking in at this point as I couldn't feel any kind of damage, but I was taking small tidbits worth that could eventually build up over time. Before I could walk over to the red ice to melt it, something appeared out of nowhere, and blasted a cold spray which froze me on the spot. "I hate being frozen," I said. "You'll break free in a few seconds," said Spike.
The moment I shattered my icy prison, another Freezard came along where it subjected me to a second blast, freezing me again, and when I broke out of this ice, a third one froze me on the spot. This was starting to get on my nerves because my health was slowly being reduced, all because of being trapped. This time, I decided to hold off on breaking free as I wanted those icy monsters to move by, otherwise this will continue repeating where I'll freeze to death. Once it was clear to make a move, I shattered the ice covering me, and moved towards the red ice, which attracted the attention of all three Freezards who appeared out of nowhere. Before any of them could react, I used my fire magic to melt them into puddles, and defeating them unlocked my way forward when the iron bars rose up.
That was an unbearable moment,
I moaned.
Be thankful you didn't take as much damage as you did before,
said Spike.
My intention was to not be injured period, but I guess Ganondorf was being serious when he said that I was having too easy of a time in here,
I said.
Do you need to drink one of those blue potions?
Asked Spike.
No, I think I can keep on going as my enhanced defense did reduce the amount of damage I took. I do wish that I could have acquired this ability from the Great Fairy a lot sooner,
I replied. I noticed a couple of small treasure chests which were hiding behind ice that couldn't be shattered, but I was having my doubts because they didn't materialize upon the Freezard's defeat, or drop down from the ceiling. There could be something useful inside those chests, or perhaps these were trap chests.
What do you think, Spike? Should I attempt to open up those chests, or leave them alone and keep going? Hard to say what's inside, and you don't have the means to check for certain, so I say ignore them,
replied Spike. Getting close to the red ice, I took out the bottle which was carrying the blue fire, and I sprinkled it across the ice which caused it to melt away. When I entered the next room, I immediately turned around where I was relieved to see that the door didn't lock behind me, and I could see a patch of red ice located on top of a high ledge. This means I need to get some more, so I went back to the previous room, and collected another batch of blue fire using my one empty bottle before going back to the other room.
Why do I have this feeling I've experienced a room similar to this one? Because you have,
said Spike.
Back in the ice cavern?
I asked.
Yes, but that puzzle in particular was a large one which involved collecting some silver rupees while avoiding ice keys which were a constant threat. This is a much smaller version where you need to push around 2 blocks instead of 1, and there are no monsters to get in the way. I suggest looking things over before getting started, for you want to try and complete the challenge without confusing yourself in the process,
replied Spike.
Since there are no silver rupees to collect this time around, I probably need to activate a switch to unlock the door,
I said.
That would be the most logical explanation,
said Spike.
I'm no fool when it comes to figuring out problems, as I can be quite astute,
I said.
Like I've said before, you've been solving these kinds of things on your own without my help,
said Spike.
Yes, but I wouldn't have made it this far without your help, Spike. If not for the numerous times you've given me advice to overcome the strongest of opponents, I would be dead right now, and probably died somewhere in the second dungeon,
I said. It's true what I said, because he has been there for me since I first began my journey, and despite the initial hesitance of being called Spike instead of Navi, the pair of us are quite the team, as he provides the information while I take care of things in my own unique fashion. Anyway, I took the liberty of studying this puzzle carefully as I want to solve this on my first attempt. If this is exactly like the previous one I experienced back at the ice cavern, if I make a mistake, then I can push one of these blocks into the abyss where it will respawn a few moments later. Personally, I'd rather not have to do that, as I want to prove that I'm capable of solving this without making an error.
Okay, I think I've figured it out,
I said.
I knew you would,
smiled Spike.
The puzzle begins with that second block over there,
I said as I walked over to where it was situated. More like slipped my way across, because the icy floor gave me little in the way of traction, and this was while I was wearing my regular boots, mind you. pushing the block until it collided with a small ice stone which was stuck in the frozen floor, bringing it to a stop. I then pushed it where it fell into a small hole in the floor. I then started shivering as the cold air was really getting to me, so I used my magic to warm myself up. With that block taken care of, I can now push the other one, and hopefully it will end where I need it to be. I pushed it into the northernmost ice stone before pushing it into the next one a short distance away, and then pushing it where it smacked into the wall.
And that is how this puzzle was meant to be solved, yet it felt rather easy to me.
Yes, which is most troubling,
said Spike.
Maybe Ganondorf really does want me to reach him,
I said.
He does need the Triforce of Courage which you have if he wants to gain the true force, but there is another side of the legend which no one, not even Princess Zelda herself, mentioned to you. In fact, she should have said something about it, given the evil king is surely to rely on the method,
said Spike.
What's that?
I asked.
The Triforce pieces cannot be separated from those who have been chosen to hold them. You, Princess Zelda, and Ganondorf are bound by the golden power, but should you act against the element you represent, it will become lost. It can also be taken away should you willingly choose to give it up, yet I suspect Ganondorf will try to force you to give them up,
replied Spike.
How do you know about this?
I asked.
The great Deku Tree mentioned it a long time ago,
replied Spike.
I hate to say it, Spike, but I think I'm walking into what could be described as the ultimate trap, for he needs the Triforce piece I have if he wants to fulfill his desires, but if I had kept away and maybe leave the kingdom, he wouldn't have been able to win. But, doing that would mean Twilight and all of Hyrule suffering his fury,
I said.
Either decision results in a disaster,
said Spike.
So I have no choice but to walk into the trap,
I sighed.
Which is probably what he wanted,
added Spike. Once again, the evil king had manipulated me. He knew I would come to his castle by kidnapping Twilight, and took advantage of it. I guess Ganondorf is someone I've been underestimating when it comes to his cunning, as my opinion of him mainly revolved around his desire for power. That is just one of his characteristics, with others being a manipulator, a skilled swordsman, a clever thief, and having knowledge of the Triforce.
I must be cautious when I reach him,
I said.
Yes, for you can't fall for any of his tricks,
said Spike. Slipping across the frozen floor until I reached the ice block which smacked into the wall and climbed onto it, I leapt up and grabbed the edge before pulling myself up where I was standing before the red ice. This patch was much thicker than what I saw in the previous room, but then that doesn't matter as blue fire can melt it no matter what. Taking out the bottle I used to pick some blue fire with, I sprinkled it on the ice where it melted, and revealed a rusty switch which I wasn't expecting. It meant needing to use the megaton hammer again, but not in the manner I was expecting, and when I activated the switch, the door unlocked and I jumped down below before sliding across to the door before smacking into it.
You did it again,
said Spike.
I knew this was going to end up happening,
I sighed. Getting back onto my feet, and entering the next room, I was now standing before the third barrier which needed destroying.
I'm expecting a conversation with Rarity, yet I wonder what she has to say considering it's been some time since I last saw her.
I took out the fairy bow and fired a light arrow which destroyed the barrier, and sure enough I was visited by an image of Rarity.
The water barrier has been dispelled, so now you are halfway through your objective, Sunset Shimmer. I would have thought that you would be finished by now, but it seems you are struggling against some powerful forces. Do not feel discouraged because of not being as fast as you wanted to be, but keep up the effort. Also,
I wish to know how my father has been faring,"
said Rarity.
"You'd be surprised at the lack of challenges," I said. "What? That is a shock, for I had expected Ganondorf to have wanted you killed before you could reach him,"
said Rarity.
"I have the one thing he needs," I said. "Oh yes, you currently possess the Triforce of Courage, so he wants you to get to the top of his tower,"
said Rarity.
"As for the well-being of your father, he has been doing well as far as I can tell," I said. "Deep down in his heart, he wishes for me to return to his side because the entirety of our people still remain trapped under the ice, but I cannot do so as destiny has chosen me to protect the Water Temple. I am sure he will eventually overcome this grief which has stricken him so, but I cannot return until this situation has been resolved. None of us sages can return until the evil of the world has been defeated, and even then we may be forced to remain at the Chamber of Sages. We do not know what is going to happen when Ganondorf is sealed away, but I am hoping we can go back to Hyrule,"
said Rarity.
"Then I need to continue destroying those barriers," I said. "Yes, for when all of them are gone, the way forward to the princess will become open. Allow me to return you to the main room of the castle, and please do hurry up about it,"
said Rarity. Her image then disappeared, and once again I ended up back in the main area where I witnessed the blue energy disappear before my eyes. I was indeed halfway done with these passageways, yet I suspect Ganondorf will make the remaining ones that much harder because my progress has been quicker than he expected.
"Which barrier should we destroy next?"
I asked.
"How about light?"
asked Spike.
"I don't see why not, and we do need to get rid of that monolith stone, which should be no problem, especially with the golden gauntlets," I replied.
Walking down the next set of stairs until I was standing in front of the giant rock that was blocking my path, I grabbed it with my hands and lifted it up without any trouble. Once again, I felt awesome because of holding such a heavy stone, but I didn't have time to show off because that would leave me susceptible to corruption. So, I tossed the monolith stone behind me where it shattered on impact against the wall before disappearing completely.
That was a lot easier than I expected, but then can the same be said for what lies down this passage? Of the 6 types, there was no light temple for us to explore, so what lies ahead is a complete mystery,
replied Spike.
Adagio mentioned illusions and not to be deceived by them, I said. It's not much information, but it's better than nothing, said Spike.
Opening the door and entering the room, I saw a large assortment of chests in a circle formation, yet there appeared to be nothing else, which struck me as odd. No doubt these chests were traps, but I doubt all of them could be. There was also a locked door at the end of the room, so it looks like I need to open some chests in order to acquire a small key. Again, the lack of anything made me feel uneasy, as though something were waiting in the shadows.
This is starting to creep me out a little, I said. So, you have already destroyed 3 of the 6 barriers, have you, kid?
Asked Tyrek.
I'm getting closer to facing you, I replied. That shall depend on whether or not you can complete the trials that lie ahead. Perhaps there is more to this than what appearances are showing, or maybe your perception needs improvement. So far, you have overcome many challenges by using a combination of your strength, magic, knowledge, and courage, yet luck is the one factor which has rarely been a factor, said Tyrek. Quite the obvious hint there, I said. Perhaps, but how sure are you that my words are accurate? Asked Tyrek. I don't, I answered.
Then perhaps your perception is even weaker than you yourself would like to admit,
said Tyrek. Once again, his voice disappeared, and I'll admit that it was getting rather annoying at this point. And why was he insisting that my way of looking at things was weak and in need of improvement? Could it be that I need to use the lens of truth in order to see something? I'm not sure what Ganondorf was planning, but I need to go through it if I am to reach the next barrier. Raising the lens to my eye, my entire body turned white, for there were monsters in every possible direction. Dozens of keys were flying above me, and in between each chest was a Skulltula, and blocking the door appeared to be Astolfos, so it looks like the evil king has raised the stakes, as it were. I need to find a way to get through this obstacle, or else this could be the end. To be continued. Chapter 68, The Other Trials of Darkness.